Uh, we're here with Suzy Levenda, who is in Arizona today, and Suzy is what I'd call a super fan, but also a super supporter of the backstretch and actually of horse racing in its entirety. And how did you get so interested in horse racing, Suzy?
You know, that's funny. It's a really interesting story. I'm actually the youngest of 14 children. And my father, when I was very young, I want to say, gosh, it had to be back in the 70s sometime. I remember him calling me in the room and watching Secretariat on TV. And I think that's where it all started. It's just his love for racing and then me just at a very young age getting introduced to it. And then 3 years ago, I came to Santa Anita for the first time, and then it was just blowing up from there.
And that was so interesting. You went to Santa Anita and you got to hanging out at Clocker's Corner.
Correct, correct. I actually went to Santa Anita, and I didn't know a single soul. And I heard that that was the best place to hang out and see the horses and meet people. And I just connected with some really amazing people, and they've become really good friends of mine since.
Well, what took you to the backstretch?
So, just the vulnerable story, the authentic story is I fell in love with an exercise rider about 3 years ago. And we had this kind of whirlwind relationship that went awry. And through that, I was able to meet Carlos Santamaria. And then that's where the story goes.
So this is actually truly a love story from beginning to end. It started out with, I guess we could say, a love affair, but then it grew because you met the assistant trainer, Carlos. And so will you take it from there and tell us what happened?
Yeah, I would love to. So I met Carlos obviously through my relationship with an exercise rider at Simon Callaghan's barn. And when that relationship was ending, he had called me and he said, Susie, Carlos is really sick. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, he's going to need a kidney. And I was like, what do you mean? I don't understand. So Carlos got sick very, very quickly, a little over a year ago. No, actually, it was a year ago in May. There's a foundation called Mulligan's Living Kidney Donors. And there's a lady named Leanne Saylor. You can find her on Facebook. And she made a post during the Kentucky Derby. They did a beautiful feature story on Carlos and told his story from beginning to end. And then she posted a link on Facebook and said, Carlos needs a kidney, click here if you would like to see if you could be a match. And I clicked the link.
Well, okay, you click that link, and then, but the next thing you know, how did it come about that you decided to actually volunteer for the transplant?
So it was a prompting definitely by God, and then it was just a knowing in my heart that it was the right thing to do. You know, I'm a firm believer that we all have an opportunity in life to express humanity to each other, and everyone deserves to have someone take a stand for their life. But there wasn't even that much thought at the time when the link was posted. It was like, oh, Carlos has been a great friend to me. You know, he supported me during the breakup. That was a little bit it was devastating. I mean, if I'm just going to be vulnerable, it was devastating. And Carlos was there for me at all the right times. So when that link popped up, there was no hesitation to click it. They send you a kit in the mail. You get your blood work done. You send the kit back. And honestly, Bill, I knew in my heart it was going to be me, but I kept pushing that aside. You know, my intuition kept saying it's going to be you, and I kept pushing it aside. And then they call you and say, they don't use the word match. They say compatible. You're compatible. Are you open to further testing? And I'm like, absolutely. And then the more it kept getting closer to the testing, I knew that I was going to be the person to give Carlos life. And you go and do a full day of testing, the most extensive test you can have on your body. They say it's the most expensive workup you can have. And then they called me back within a few days and they said, you're great, you're good to go. And we can schedule the surgery within a month. So Carlos had to get through the Breeders' Cup. So we did it after the Breeders' Cup, of course. And it was within 6 months, I think, from start to finish, from the time I clicked the link,
That
that
is
we
amazing.
that we were done. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious, when you decided that you would do that, and then you have a rather large family, so you probably had 14 or 15 different opinions. How did that go?
No, that's so funny that you mentioned that, because it was definitely an issue. So to be honest with you, I didn't tell a lot of my friends. I only told the friends that I knew that would be supportive. And then I didn't tell any of my family until 2 weeks before the surgery. I was really nervous. I sent them all a text, and I was really pleasantly surprised that all of them were supportive. All of them were supportive. You know, I have a brother that's a fireman for the past 25 years, and he said, Suzy, I'm really proud of you, but I'm concerned. I also have a daughter that's a nurse practitioner here in Phoenix, and she said, Mom, this is so amazing and so awesome, and I have my concerns, but I'm really proud of you. So I tried to share it with people that I knew would bring me positive energy. That was really crucial for me, is keeping my surroundings very positive with input. I didn't want to take on anyone's fear, because Bill, I had none, like not even one little crumb of fear, anxiety, nothing. So I didn't want to take anyone else's on. Yeah.
Well, I think you have this humanitarian in your soul, because I actually read where you had done a couple of other things, and I actually also realized that you're I don't know, did you start the Women of Strength?
I did. I did. I can talk a little bit more about the few things that I do around humanity if you like.
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, so 7 years ago, 7.5 years ago, I work for a mortgage company. A lot of people don't realize that. I work business development and marketing for a mortgage company here in Arizona. So my job is very PR. It's very social. It's very networking. So I meet people for a living, and I think is why it was so easy for me to meet people at Clocker's Corner. So 7.5 years ago, I started a big event called Women of Strength. And I knew that we needed to cultivate relationships with women differently. Since then, it also includes men. But the premise of it was inspire, encourage, mentor, and lead. That's the foundation of the event. And then the whole idea of it is for us to be sharing our stories, sharing your story, tell your story through vulnerability and authenticity, like I'm doing with you now, because we all have a story. So I wanted to provide a platform where men and women could come and share their story. And then that gives other people permission to share theirs. So in the 7.5 years, I've done 11 of them, including in Tacoma, Washington. It's grown from the first one of 230 people, and now I have to cut it off at a little over 500 people. And it's turned into a movement in my industry. You know, we don't talk real estate at all, even though everyone in the audience is in the real estate industry. We don't talk about any of that. We talk about humanity. We talk about empowerment. We talk about sharing our story. We talk about leadership. We talk about forgiveness. And it's just turned into this just amazing, amazing movement here in Arizona.
Well, that is so interesting. Well, now, you know, as I sit here, you're in Arizona, and of course, Clocker Corner's quite a way, far away. So what do you do? Make frequent trips there, or how's that work?
Yeah, so when I was in my relationship, I was coming about every 2 weeks. And then I actually got a guest house behind one of the trainers. He lived behind the track, and I had a guest house there for 6 months. But I was coming about every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, then once a month. Then when the relationship went awry, obviously I wasn't coming as often. But I still had an opportunity to create amazing, amazing friendships through the people that I met there, you know, whether it was a trainer or just fans, you know, some of the jockeys, some of the exercise riders. It's just this amazing, amazing sense of community there.
So have you been there since the virus has gone on, or?
I have not, because
Okay.
I understand that you're not allowed to go back on the track
Right. I
unless.
hear they're just now starting to open it up.
Oh, that would be nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm definitely overdue for a visit. I was there in March because that was Carlos's first day back, was March 4th. So he flew out to Arizona and spent 3 days with me. Oh my goodness. I had to meet all of my friends, all of my family. drove him around for 3 days. We were inseparable. I think I drove him crazy, but he got to meet everybody who donated money for his cause. They donated money for me to travel to Cincinnati where we had the surgery. So it was like everyone already knew him and they just embraced him as family. And, you know, I have a large family, like I mentioned, so it was kind of funny that all my brothers just really took him under their wing.
Well, now, was that at the University of Cincinnati?
Yes, it was. They have the best transplant center in the nation and one of the highest success rates, and it was just flawless.
I actually worked at the College of Medicine for 20 years there.
You know right where it is then. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And we're actually, I think I told you, my wife has got some challenges. And so we're
Right.
going to the Barrett Center quite often, which is right next to the
Right.
hospital. So anyway, that's side of it, kind of a side note. But I guess Carlos is very happy, and I guess really you saved his life. So it's an incredible thing what you did. And so I don't know, we really appreciate you taking the time
Welcome.
and talking to us about it. And it's one of those humanitarian stories that goes on in the racing industry. You hear a lot of negative publicity, but when you hear about things like this, it really kind of restores your soul toward it. And there are so many good stories. And so we really appreciate
Oh, you're so welcome. And
you taking the time.
I mentioned to you yesterday when we chatted about, you know, there is, and I think that's just the way the media is. They focus so much on the negative, but they forget that there's so many other things that are happening at the track. It's not just about horses, and it's certainly not just about horses that have, you know, died recently. That there's a whole community of people and families and generations and, you know, people in need and people who need support. And Eli does such an amazing job, Pastor Eli, at the track in supporting everyone, and women that are struggling with relationships and people who are sick and their family sick, and just like Carlos, you know, there were so many people that knew of the story, but, you know, I don't know why, for whatever reason, people were too afraid to come forward. Um, but yeah, I'm happy to spread that message of expressing humanity back to each other. It's how we survive, and it's necessary.
Right. Well, we really appreciate you doing the interview.
Okay.
Okay, and thank you.